At approximately 12:30 in the afternoon Eastern Time, the largest wireless carrier in the United States went dark. Phones that had been working moments earlier suddenly displayed a single word in their status bars: SOS. That icon, designed to indicate emergency-only connectivity, spread across devices from New York to Dallas, from Charlotte to Chicago. Within minutes, Down Detector registered an avalanche of user complaints. By the time the surge peaked, more than 178,000 reports had flooded in within a single 15-minute window. The final tally would reach 2.3 million outage reports over the course of the day. For nearly 10 hours, an estimated 1.5 to 2 million Verizon customers could not make phone calls. They could not send text messages. They could not access mobile data. In a society where wireless connectivity has become as essential as electricity or running water, those customers were effectively stranded. Some could not reach their doctors. Others could not navigate city streets without GPS. Deliveries went uncompleted. Business transactions stalled. And in the most serious cases, people could not reliably dial 911. The scale of the disruption prompted emergency alerts from government agencies across the country. New York City Emergency Management posted a warning on social media advising residents that the outage may affect some users trying to call 911. The advisory recommended using a device from another carrier, a landline, or physically visiting a police or fire station to report emergencies. Washington issued similar guidance through its Alert DC system. The notion that millions of Americans might need to physically travel to emergency services because their phones did not work is not a scenario most people associate with 2026. Verizon acknowledged the problem shortly after 1 p.m. Eastern Time, more than 30 minutes after reports began spiking. The initial statement was minimal. Engineers were engaged in working to identify and solve the issue quickly. No explanation was offered. No timeline was provided. As hours passed and service remained unavailable, frustration mounted. Social media filled with complaints, memes, and increasingly pointed questions about what exactly had gone wrong at America's largest wireless carrier. The company's second statement came hours later and offered little additional clarity. Teams remained deployed. Work continued. Verizon understood the impact on customers' days, but the phones still did not work. By early evening, more than 6 hours into the outage, Verizon had still not explained the cause or provided an estimate for restoration. Customers who had paid for reliable service found themselves cut off from the modern world, unable to do anything but wait. Service finally returned around 10:15 p.m. Eastern Time, nearly 10 hours after the outage began. Verizon's statement that night acknowledged what had become obvious. The company had let many customers down. They apologized. They promised to make it right. They announced that affected customers would receive account credits, but they still did not explain what had happened. The explanation, such as it was, came the following day. In statements to multiple news outlets, Verizon confirmed that the outage was caused by a software issue. The company emphasized that there was no indication of a cybersecurity incident. This was not a hack. This was not an attack. This was something inside Verizon's own systems that cascaded into a nationwide failure affecting millions of people for most of a business day. The phrase software issue does a great deal of work in that explanation. Modern mobile networks bear almost no resemblance to the telecommunications infrastructure of previous decades. They are not primarily physical systems of towers and cables. They are software systems. Thousands of policies and microservices handle subscriber authentication, voice over LTE call setup, 5G connectivity, quality of service rules, and routing decisions. A single misconfiguration, a faulty update, an error in change management can propagate through these systems in minutes and take down services across entire regions. One report suggested the failure originated from a server in New Jersey. If accurate, that detail illuminates both the centralization and the fragility of modern network architecture. A problem in one location can radiate outward to affect customers in every major metropolitan area simultaneously. The geographic distribution of the outage, which hit cities across the East Coast most severely but affected users nationwide, suggests the failure occurred somewhere deep in Verizon's core network rather than at the edge. The Federal Communications Commission announced it was actively investigating and monitoring the situation. That investigation will examine whether Verizon complied with mandatory outage reporting requirements, whether the company's response met regulatory standards, and what steps might prevent similar failures in the future. A New York State Assembly member formally called for an FCC probe, citing the outage's unacceptable impact on public safety. The regulatory scrutiny is not surprising given recent history. Less than 2 years earlier, in February 2024, AT&T suffered an even more catastrophic failure that left more than 125 million devices without service for at least 12 hours. That outage blocked more than 92 million voice calls. More than 25,000 attempts to reach 911 failed. The FCC's subsequent investigation found the failure was caused by a configuration error introduced during routine maintenance. An employee placed a new network element into the production network. The configuration did not conform to established procedures. 3 minutes later, the nationwide outage began. The AT&T incident revealed systemic failures in testing, peer review, and safeguards. The FCC found insufficient controls to ensure approval of changes affecting the core network. It found a lack of controls to mitigate effects once an outage began. The agency referred the matter to its Enforcement Bureau for potential violations of Commission rules. The pattern is disturbingly consistent. Configuration errors and software updates gone wrong have become the primary threat to telecommunications reliability in the cloud-native era. Lee McKnight, an associate professor at Syracuse University's School of Information Studies, described the new reality to NPR. Outages are a fact of life these days for major telecommunications firms. Modern telecom networks are cloud networks. 5G networks are mainly like hundreds of different cloud services. The telecom companies have not yet adjusted their training to that reality. Their staff have to be expert not just in cell towers and wireless, but about cloud services like AWS or Microsoft or Google. The implications extend far beyond inconvenience. The FCC has stated that more than 80% of 911 calls now originate from wireless phones. When a major carrier goes down, emergency services across the country face potential disruption. Hospitals coordinating patient transport may lose communication. Small businesses running point-of-sale systems over cellular connections cannot process transactions. Households that have abandoned landlines entirely in favor of mobile phones find themselves isolated. The human stories from January 14 illustrate what infrastructure failure means in practice. A 27-year-old public relations professional in New York City woke up feeling ill and needed to contact her doctor. Without cell service, she could not make calls. Without mobile data, she could not access the patient portal to request an appointment. The two-factor authentication systems that protect modern accounts require receiving text messages. With text unavailable, she could not log in. A routine sick day became an exercise in technological helplessness. A product designer in Brooklyn had dinner plans with friends, but worried about finding the restaurant without cell service. Before leaving home, he downloaded offline maps over Wi-Fi, a workaround most users would not think to employ. A software engineer in Hoboken was working from home waiting for a television delivery. The delivery driver could not reach him by phone. The engineer eventually received a text, apparently delayed through the system, indicating the driver had been waiting outside for 20 minutes. These anecdotes may seem minor in isolation. Multiply them by 2 million affected customers, and the aggregate impact becomes significant. Business productivity lost, appointments missed, transactions delayed, anxiety amplified for anyone who depends on their phone for medical alerts, security systems, or staying connected to elderly relatives. The infrastructure failure rippled through countless daily activities that most people do not consciously associate with cellular service until that service disappears. Verizon's compensation offer was a $20 account credit, redeemable through the My Verizon app. Customers would receive text messages when the credit became available. The company's statement acknowledged the inadequacy of any monetary response. This credit is not meant to make up for what happened. No credit really can, but it is a way of acknowledging our customers' time and showing that this matters to us. $20 represents approximately 2 to 3 days of wireless service for an average consumer plan. The outage lasted roughly 10 hours. By that arithmetic, the credit exceeds the proportional value of lost service time. But the calculation misses the point. The cost of an outage is not measured in minutes of connectivity. It is measured in missed opportunities, failed communications, and the erosion of trust in essential infrastructure. The competitive response was swift and predictable. T-Mobile confirmed its network was operating normally and noted that its customers might be unable to reach Verizon subscribers. AT&T made similar assurances. Krispy Kreme offered free donuts to Verizon customers between 5 and 7 p.m., capitalizing on the frustration with a marketing opportunity. The commercial ecosystem treats infrastructure failures as moments for competitive advantage rather than systemic concerns affecting the entire sector. That framing obscures a deeper problem. The three major carriers all operate on fundamentally similar architectures. They all face the same pressures around software complexity, change management, and the transition to cloud-native infrastructure. An outage at one carrier does not indicate that competing carriers are immune. It indicates that the entire industry operates closer to the edge of failure than most customers realize. Industry analysts have long warned about the fragility of telecommunications infrastructure. Carriers aim for 5 nines availability, meaning 99.999% uptime. That standard permits approximately 5 minutes of downtime per year. A 10-hour outage exceeds the entire annual downtime budget by a factor of more than 100. When these failures occur, they reveal the gap between aspirational reliability standards and operational reality. The 2024 AT&T outage prompted promises of reform. The company implemented additional technical controls, enhanced peer review procedures, and adopted safeguards to ensure maintenance work could not proceed without proper approvals. Yet similar failures continue to occur. The 2020 T-Mobile outage disrupted 911 calls and resulted in an FCC settlement. The 2022 Rogers outage in Canada, caused by a maintenance change that cascaded through core systems, took down service across the country for an extended period. The common thread is change management discipline and the difficulty of maintaining it in increasingly complex systems. Verizon's internal review is ongoing. The company has promised a full investigation into what happened. External observers expect the findings will identify specific technical failures, probably a software update or configuration change that produced unintended consequences. The more important question is whether those findings will lead to structural changes that reduce the probability of recurrence. The broader issue is accountability. Telecommunications carriers operate essential infrastructure. They are regulated by federal and state agencies. They make public commitments to reliability. When those commitments fail, the consequences fall on millions of customers who have limited alternatives. Most American consumers cannot easily switch carriers. They are locked into contracts, device payment plans, and family plans that make switching costly and inconvenient. The market structure that produces competitive advertising does not produce competitive accountability. The FCC has authority to impose penalties for outage reporting violations and to require corrective action. Whether that authority is sufficient to prevent future failures is unclear. The Commission's report on the AT&T outage included recommendations that read as obvious in retrospect. Only approved network changes developed pursuant to internal procedures and industry best practices should be deployed on production networks. It should not be possible to load changes that fail to meet those criteria. That such recommendations need to be stated explicitly suggests the industry has not internalized basic principles of change management. The January 14 Verizon outage joins a growing list of infrastructure failures that have disrupted daily life for millions of Americans in recent years. The October 2025 Amazon Web Services outage took down large swaths of the internet, affecting services from social media platforms to business applications. The CrowdStrike incident in July 2024 delivered the infamous blue screen of death to millions of Windows systems worldwide, grounding flights and closing businesses. Each incident reinforces the same lesson. Modern life depends on digital infrastructure that is more fragile than it appears. The response to these failures tends to follow a pattern. The immediate crisis generates intense media coverage and public frustration. The affected company apologizes, offers compensation, and promises improvement. Regulatory agencies announce investigations. Then, attention moves elsewhere. The structural conditions that produced the failure remain largely unchanged until the next outage. Whether Verizon's January 14 failure will break that pattern remains to be seen. The FCC investigation may produce findings that lead to meaningful regulatory reform. Consumer pressure may force carriers to invest more heavily in redundancy and testing, Or the incident may fade from memory, replaced by the next crisis, leaving the telecommunications industry to continue operating on the edge of reliability while charging premium prices for services that occasionally fail to work at all. For the millions of customers who spent 10 hours on January 14th staring at SOS icons on their phones, the experience was a reminder of dependency. They depend on wireless connectivity for communication, navigation, commerce, and safety. They depend on carriers to maintain that connectivity reliably. And when that dependency is betrayed, they have few options beyond waiting, complaining, and eventually accepting a $20 credit as acknowledgement of their lost time. The phones work again. The credit is available in the app. The investigation continues. The next software update is already being prepared somewhere in some network operations center. The question is not whether another major outage will occur. The question is when, and whether anyone will have learned enough from this one to prevent it.